1945. The world breathes a collective sigh of relief. The deadliest conflict in human history is over. In the streets of London, crowds cheer, flags wave, and for a moment, it feels like the British Empire, which stood defiant and alone against tyranny, has secured its place in history. But what if I told you that this victory was the beginning of the end? That in winning the war, Britain was about to lose everything. It's a shocking paradox, isn't it? The nation that won the war ended up paying a price so high that it cost them their empire, their wealth, and their status as a global superpower. How did this happen? How did the victor become the vanquished? Stick with me as we uncover the story of how Britain won the war but lost the world. Let's set the scene. Before the war, the British Empire was the largest in history. The sun, as they famously said, never set on it. From India to Africa, from Canada to Australia, a quarter of the world's landmass and population was under British rule. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency, and the Royal Navy dominated the seas. London was the financial capital of the globe. Britain wasn't just **a** superpower. It was *** the *** superpower. But this vast, sprawling empire was already showing cracks. Nationalist movements were growing, and the costs of maintaining such a colossal global presence were starting to add up. Then, in 1939, everything changed. When Britain declared war on Germany, it wasn't just a national commitment, it was an imperial one. Resources, soldiers, and money poured in from across the empire. But the cost was staggering. Britain liquidated its overseas assets, sold off its gold reserves, and spent billions. To put it in perspective, by 1945, Britain had spent more on the war than its entire national income for the year 1938. The country was, to put it bluntly, bankrupt. While the bombs were falling on London during the Blitz, the foundations of Britain's economic power were being systematically dismantled, not by German bombers, but by the sheer, crushing cost of survival. The nation was literally selling its future to pay for its present. While Britain was bleeding itself dry, a new power was rising across the Atlantic. The United States, which entered the war late in 1941, became the arsenal of democracy. American factories churned out ships, planes, and tanks at an unprecedented rate. The war didn't just not bankrupt America, it supercharged its economy. By the end of the conflict, the US held 2/3 of the world's gold reserves and its economy was stronger than the rest of the world combined. This economic dominance was formalized through the Lend-Lease Act. On the surface, it was a lifeline, providing Britain with essential war materials. But the terms were harsh. Britain had to effectively hand over its financial secrets, trade advantages, and naval bases to the Americans. The price of American help was the dismantling of the very system that made Britain a global power. The torch was being passed, whether Britain liked it or not. Let's not forget the other emerging superpower, the Soviet Union. Despite suffering unimaginable losses, over 27 million people, the USSR came out of the war as a military giant. The Red Army, having pushed the Nazis all the way back to Berlin, didn't go home. Instead, it occupied Eastern Europe, creating a buffer zone of satellite states that would become the Warsaw Pact. A new Iron Curtain descended across Europe, as Winston Churchill himself would later call it. The world was no longer unipolar, dominated by Britain. It was now a bipolar world, a tense standoff between two new giants, the capitalist United States and the communist Soviet Union. Britain, the old lion, was now caught in the middle, a junior partner to its former colony, America. So, where did this leave the winners and losers? It's a strange picture. Germany and Japan, the defeated Axis powers, were devastated. But under the American security umbrella and with massive investment through programs like the Marshall Plan, they were rebuilt into economic miracles. They didn't have to spend fortunes on defense or maintaining global empires. They could focus purely on economic recovery and innovation. Even China, torn apart by civil war and Japanese invasion, was granted a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, a recognition of its newfound status on the world stage. Everyone, it seemed, was moving forward. Everyone except Britain. For the British Empire, the end of the war was a death knell. The very ideals Britain fought for, freedom, self-determination, and democracy, were now being used against its own imperial rule. How could a nation that fought against foreign domination justify its own? The answer was, it couldn't. In 1947, the jewel in the crown, India, gained its independence, a moment that triggered a domino effect across the globe. One by one, colonies in Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean demanded and won their freedom. The process was often chaotic and sometimes violent, but the outcome was inevitable. The empire that had taken centuries to build was dismantled in just a couple of decades. The sun was finally setting on the British Empire. And then came the final humiliation. Drowning in debt, with its industry shattered and its people facing rationing that was even stricter than during the war, Britain had to go cap in hand to its new master. In 1946, Britain was forced to take a massive bailout loan from the United States, worth $3.75 billion. That's over $50 billion in today's money. The conditions were, once again, severe, forcing Britain to make the pound fully convertible, a move that triggered a currency crisis and further weakened its economy. The once proud nation that ruled the waves was now effectively in receivership, dependent on American charity just to keep the lights on. It was a brutal, humbling end to its era of global dominance. The final payment on this wartime loan wasn't made until 2006, a 60-year reminder of its fall from grace. So, when we look back at World War II, the narrative of a clear-cut victory is far too simple. Yes, Britain's defiance was heroic. Yes, its people endured unimaginable hardship with incredible spirit. They won the battle against fascism, a victory for all humanity. But in doing so, they sacrificed their empire, their wealth, and their power. The world that emerged from the ashes of the war was one not of their making. It was a world dominated by Washington and Moscow. Britain was left as a secondary power, grappling with a painful loss of identity and prestige that, in many ways, it is still dealing with today. It's a powerful and tragic lesson. Sometimes, the cost of victory can be just as devastating as defeat. What do you think? Was Britain the biggest loser of World War II? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. It's a complex piece of history, and I'd love to hear your perspective. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please give this video a thumbs up, and consider subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. We'll see you in the next one.